implore the men in the world who have women that they say they care about, daughters that they are raising, that this is their issue too. I mean, for men to sit on their hands over this issue and trade out women's health for a tax break or whatever it is a sad statement about that man's level of value of the women.
Talking about how expensive it was to live in the White House. Go for it.
It's expensive to live in the White House.
Yeah.
As many people don't know. I mean, much is not covered. You're paying for every bit of food that you eat. You're not paying for housing and the staff in it, but everything, even travel. If you're not traveling with the president, if your kids are coming on a Bright Star, which is the First Lady's plane, we had to pay for their travel to be on the...
Michelle Obama entered the room cloaked in her signature aura, an almost mythic presence of fame and finesse. But under the unforgiving spotlight of live television, Charlie Kirk and Patrick Bet-David didn't flinch. Armed with razor-sharp logic and an arsenal of inconvenient truths, they launched into a verbal offensive that cut through the charisma and challenged the carefully curated image. This wasn't your average back and forth, it was a jarring moment of reckoning. The intensity was electric, the tone unapologetically direct. Viewers watched as the narrative shifted in real time. Even some of her most loyal supporters couldn't help but pause, blink, and wonder, had they missed something all along?
Oh yes, no, she's at her complaining quotient, but I guess she's talking about abortion there as if like, women's health. But let me just be clear: not a single Trump voting male in the world is ever going to be won over by complaining Michelle Obama.
Why would you ever post this picture? No, the people were, and I'm actually not being funny. They were asking Barack, why would you ever post this picture? What part of Michelle's picture? Barack looks great. That is not a...
Can you close up on her, Rob?
Actually don't, but can you zoom out a little bit? Not for bad reasons. It's just she doesn't look good in that picture.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't look good. So guess what you do when sometimes you don't look good? You ask and you say, hey, babe, you okay if I post this picture? No, use it.
Charlie Kirk launched in with the focus of someone who'd been sharpening his critique since the moment he first heard the word becoming. Cool, collected, and utterly unshaken, he didn't need theatrics, just facts, lined up like dominoes, ready to collapse on their own weight. With surgical precision, he went for the ideological jugular, offering commentary so sharp it didn't have to shout to be felt. No grandstanding, no dramatic pauses, just a quiet dismantling of a narrative inflated by years of media polish and self-congratulation.
And one side note on Michelle Obama, can we just note how overrated she is? And like all the hype around Michelle Obama, she's gonna run for office, and she's just, I don't want to get into the aesthetics of all of it, but the presentation of her podcast.
But let me ask you a question. Running for president
let me ask you a question.
I don't get it.
Let me ask you a question. How much of becoming a president on the Democratic side, hear me out, how much of being a president on the Democratic side do you think is you getting picked or you saying, I'm going to be a president? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Okay, how much of it?
If you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe and tap the bell icon so you never miss a moment that cuts through the noise. Michelle Obama, he argued, wasn't just a former First Lady. She had evolved into something closer to a full-time influencer, with only a passing relationship to public accountability. Between glossy Netflix specials and best-selling book tours, something crucial got lost. The memory of real Americans. Not the curated ones in polished monages, but everyday people who remember the substance behind the slogans, and they're not buying the filters anymore.
I have mourned the dimming of that hope, and maybe you've experienced the same feelings, that deep pit in my stomach, a palpable sense of dread about the future.
It's so dark. And now she's saying, now I have hope because of Kamala Harris. The apocalyptic undertones of the Democrat Party is dramatic. This is their identity. This is their...
Charlie's trademark isn't about punching up or down. He aims straight for wherever the nonsense hides. And in this case, Michelle's brand looked more like a luxury estate built on narrative acrobatics. With calm precision, he laid the groundwork, reminding viewers how the woman who once claimed to rise above politics somehow managed to leave her fingerprints on nearly every cultural flashpoint since 2009. From primetime speeches to subtle jabs in documentaries, her influence hasn't exactly been subtle or silent.
All of a sudden, the Dems did flip in August, and they put a Newsom-Michelle combination. Do you know what mainstream media would do with that? CNN, what Jimmy Fallon, Colbert, all these podcasts, the Oprah Winfrey, the NBA, LeBron,
Forget it.
Do you know what Taylor Swift, do you know what these guys would be doing? It would be bonkers. By the way, if it is Michelle and Newsom, it's gonna be.
Subtlety, it seems, is Michelle Obama's least favorite accessory. She could write a children's book about broccoli and still manage to wedge in a veiled commentary on voter suppression. And Charlie Kirk wasn't about to let that slide. This wasn't a policy critique. It was a spotlight on what he called the performance art of polished activism. According to him, her public persona isn't a reflection of heartfelt concern, but a carefully orchestrated act designed for maximum cultural applause. Then came the teardown, vintage Charlie. He dismantled her image with the precision of someone assembling IKEA furniture without the instructions, every piece out of place, every illusion exposed. Michelle's brand has long been rooted in relatability. Dancing on talk shows, rocking designer sneakers, hosting cooking segments with celebrities. But Charlie zoomed in on the contradiction. How one can't play both cultural icon and revolutionary underdog without inviting scrutiny. He hit hardest when he said, if Michelle truly stood for the oppressed, she wouldn't be sipping herbal infusions on a $60,000 designer couch, while telling blue-collar Americans they're just not dreaming hard enough. The disconnect, he argued, is more than ironic, it's structural. And true to form, Charlie didn't stop at optics. He peeled back the layers, diving into the psychology behind her ascent. In his view, her transformation into a cultural saint wasn't forged through struggle, but engineered through marketing genius.
Just see, she doesn't look good in that picture.
Yeah.
Sometimes you don't look good. So guess what you do when sometimes you don't look good? You ask and you say, hey, babe, you okay if I post this picture? No, use this one, use that one, use this one. So I don't even know why he posted the picture. You know, he has his own reasons for posting a picture. So a lot of people said, why are you even doing this? It's not cool for you to post a picture like that.
He said the media treated Michelle Obama the way teenagers treat their favorite boy band, completely starstruck, wildly irrational, and absolutely allergic to criticism. She wasn't just admired, she was untouchable. Question her, and you were instantly labeled sexist, racist, or tossed into the ideological penalty box for daring to step out of line. Charlie Kirk didn't just critique Michelle, he slow-roasted the entire brand, skewering it with a side of elite hypocrisy. Her best-selling memoir, he called it less of a personal revelation and more of a meticulously crafted product, tested in focus groups, polished by consultants, and designed to tug heartstrings without inviting real questions. To him, Michelle wasn't relatable, she was rehearsed. And there's a world of difference between a role model and a role player. Every tearful interview, every perfectly timed anecdote about adversity, every sly dig cloaked in inspirational language, he painted it all as a masterclass in narrative control. And just when it seemed like he'd exhausted every angle, he dropped the hammer. Her infamous remark about not being proud of America until a specific political victory. Kirk treated that line like it was live ammunition, slowly, methodically unpacking it like a bomb technician, revealing what he saw as the explosive truth buried underneath the applause line.
I mean, she's complaining. Right, again, I'm not trying to look at people's looks. That's not what I'm doing. I'm just saying the whole aura of it, to use a Gen Z term, is terrible. It's negative. It's just kind of her lamenting. And then she's obviously, there's problems with her daughters and all that. I don't want to get into that. But we built up on the right. Michelle Obama is going to be the hardest person ever to run against. And her book sold so many copies. And
what kind of person ascends to the pinnacle of power, enjoys every luxury afforded by a free society, and then turns around to scold the very system that made it all possible? That was Charlie's question, and he didn't whisper it. He highlighted what he called the paradox of Michelle Obama. A woman who benefits from the American dream yet speaks of America like it's a waking nightmare. In his words, her version of the country feels less like a reality and more like a hologram, one filled with oppression, fear, and injustice that, oddly enough, never seems to delay her private jet or interrupt her speaking tour schedule. Then Patrick Bet-David stepped in, and the entire energy shifted. If Charlie was a precision strike, Patrick was the wrecking ball. Less a political commentator and more a one-man cultural demolition crew, Patrick didn't just critique Michelle's brand. He ripped through it like a contractor discovering rot behind the marble in a Beverly Hills estate. His delivery was part stand-up, part sermon. You could almost hear the popcorn popping as he leaned in, flashed a smirk, and dropped the setup like a casual thought. You all already know, but let's just say it out loud. And then boom, the punchline landed with surgical force. He asked the room why the media treats Michelle like a sacred figure, immune from accountability. Then with a slow-burn delivery, he dared to touch every ideological sacred cow she's built her brand around. Patrick didn't accuse, he exposed. He pointed out that Michelle doesn't speak like someone aiming to uplift. She speaks like someone staging a national guilt trip, wrapping shame in silk and selling it as inspiration.
First of all, just like the embedded kind of just implied chauvinism that all of our relationships in the Trump world are like, we tell our wives exactly what to do. It's like, okay, no, we all have agency, okay? Secondly, yeah. I just have to comment on this. She's really lost a step. Just embedded in her language is like,
He openly mocked the idea that Michelle Obama serves as the moral compass of the nation, a title, he argued, built more on media myth than merit. According to Patrick, if your brand of morality includes lecturing millions of everyday Americans while cashing massive checks from the very corporations you publicly criticize, then maybe, just maybe, you're not the ethical lighthouse you imagine yourself to be. He didn't hold back. With pitch-perfect timing, he questioned how someone could spend 8 years at the heart of global power. Air Force One rides, rooms full of world leaders, unrestricted media adoration, and still emerge claiming to be oppressed. Then came the impersonation. He mimicked her signature delivery, the slow, theatrical pauses, the furrowed brows of concern, the tone soaked in solemnity. It wasn't a punchline. It was a mirror held up to the performance. The absurdity, he suggested, spoke for itself. Listening to Michelle talk about struggle, he said, was like watching a billionaire complain about ATM fees. It's disconnected, tone-deaf, and impossible to take seriously. Yet, the media still applauds on cue, because in today's cultural script, questioning Michelle is taboo. It's not just unpopular, it's practically forbidden.
Energy and more intensity. It's like this Michelle Obama just looks broken. She's kind of doing the wine mom thing, and she's just kind of like, I'm just kind of meandering through life. Anyway, I'm not upset about
populated
it. Populated
like every 30 seconds with, what about me? No one asks about me.
Totally, exactly. Or and Megan, I know you'll take this in good stride, but she's like, we black women need to complain more. Yeah, that's...
Patrick then set his sights on what he called the establishment's peculiar obsession with crowning Michelle Obama as modern political royalty. But to him, it wasn't about her actual achievements. It was about fitting her neatly into a pre-approved storyline. A carefully crafted persona scripted by consultants, not shaped by risk or revolution. He argued that Michelle isn't so much admired as she is projected. People don't see her as she is. They see what they need her to be. A symbol. A placeholder. A perfectly polished mascot for a movement built on optics more than substance. Like a TED talk on empathy ghostwritten by a branding agency, slick, digestible, and ultimately hollow. Patrick didn't stop there. He stripped away the surface-level inspiration and asked the audience to look deeper. Beyond the applause lines, he said, you won't find a rebel or a reformer. You'll find someone who's never truly put anything on the line, not her status, not her wealth, not even her public comfort. According to him, Michelle never gambled with her own stakes, only with the hopes, trust, and idealism of the people watching. And that, he suggested, is the real illusion too few dare to question.
Obama says, until recently, I've mourned the dimming of that hope. And maybe you've experienced the same feelings. Is that a pit in my stomach? A palpable sense of dread about the future? Now, look, Michelle Obama has well-documented anxiety problems. And it's very interesting. When they are not in control of political power, they get anxiety. And being at the DNC, this for them is church. For them, this was...
He even joked that Michelle Obama's brand of activism carries about as much risk as a lavender-scented candle. Uplifting, pleasant, but completely safe. She tells Americans to rise up, to be bold, to demand change. But only if it doesn't interfere with brunch reservations or disrupt a luxury lifestyle. Her so-called revolution, he quipped, fits perfectly inside a monogrammed gift bag, complete with a signed memoir and a podcast subscription. It's activism with a glossy finish. Social change, brought to you by corporate sponsors and feel-good storytelling. According to him, it's designed not to provoke, but to soothe. He argued that Michelle doesn't exercise power through traditional channels, debate, legislation, or public accountability. Instead, she's mastered something far more potent, the emotional high ground. She doesn't engage in hard conversations, she emotes. She doesn't challenge her critics, she implies they lack empathy. Patrick admitted, it's a brilliant move. But make no mistake, he said, it's still a move, a tactic, a performance. And once you recognize the script, you can't unhear the lines. It's not grassroots leadership, it's theater, Broadway dressed up as a political crusade.
I wonder, in fact, if we would have said 3 weeks ago, Blake, if we would have said that Joy Reid and Michelle Obama and Sheila Jackson Lee and Ketanji Brown Jackson were affirmative action picks, we would have been called the racist. But now they're coming out and they're saying it for us. They're coming out and they're saying, I'm only here because of affirmative action. Yeah, we know. You do not have the brain processing power to otherwise be taken really seriously. You had to go steal a white person's slot to go be taken.
He closed with what could only be described as a rhetorical Molotov cocktail, tossed with precision, aimed straight at the heart of the narrative. Patrick pointed out what he called the ultimate irony, that Michelle Obama, the woman endlessly framed as an outsider speaking truth to power, has never actually lived outside the system. She is the system. The polished product of Ivy League halls, presidential motorcades, and multi-million-dollar media deals. Patrick posed the uncomfortable question, when one of the most celebrated, influential, and financially empowered women in America still positions herself as a victim, what exactly does victory look like? At what point do we stop applauding the struggle and start acknowledging the privilege? That was the thread both Kirk and Patrick pulled, each in their own style. Michelle Obama's story only holds up if we all agree to keep the lights low and the questions quieter. But these two weren't playing along. They yanked back the velvet curtain, spotlighted the backstage machinery, and revealed what they saw, not a movement, but a meticulously engineered illusion, driven less by truth and more by theatric.
So, what are you thinking when you're giving this message? Like, what are you thinking in your mind? Because let's do data. Rob, can you type in Obama's net worth in 2007? What was Obama in 2007? 1.2 million, 1.3 million. Okay, so their net worth is, let's write this down. This is pre-White House. Their collective net worth was 1.3 million. Can you go to where their net worth was in 2016 when they're done being president? Okay, 2016. So their net worth, as expensive as it was, they went from being 1.3 million to 12.
Charlie Kirk took aim at the ideological contradictions, the glaring gaps between what's preached and what's practiced. Patrick Bet David, on the other hand, went after the cultural myth-making itself. Together, they didn't just poke holes. They surgically dismantled the carefully constructed persona of Michelle Obama. And it wasn't out of malice or petty politics. It was because someone had to say what so many have been thinking but are too afraid to voice. Not every polished speech or camera-ready smile belongs to a hero. Sometimes it's just exceptional branding. When the lights dim and the applause dies down, what remains isn't always authenticity. It's often a well-packaged narrative designed to sell inspiration without ever inviting inspection. And maybe, just maybe, the story we've been sold is more sparkle than substance. That realization doesn't come all at once. It unravels, thread by thread. Because this wasn't just a roast, it felt more like an awakening. The red carpet is still there, the spotlight's still fixed, and Michelle Obama remains center stage. But now the audience isn't entirely entranced. There's a shift. Eyes are narrowing, brows are furrowing. The spell is weakening. Then, just when it seemed like the curtain might close, Patrick leaned back and lobbed one last grenade. He asked why someone so dedicated to the struggle always seems to show up in gated communities, speaking behind velvet ropes, delivering polished wisdom to audiences made of CEOs, celebrities, and socialites nodding in choreographed agreement. Her version of outreach, he joked, looked more like luxury brand expansion than grassroots activism. Meanwhile, Charlie circled back with a reminder that landed like a gut punch. The most dangerous kind of lie isn't blatant. It's a half-truth dressed in applause. Not just about Michelle, but about the entire media machine that keeps the myth alive.